Hey everyone, this is Adam Parkin, the Codependent Coder, and I thought I'd do a little tutorial today on how to take a simple little Django project and change the test runner in it to use Pytest to run the unit tests. So let's dive in. So I have this toy little Django project I created. And it's just kind of has like a sort of REST-like interface for basically getting this like counter object. And you can think of a counter as being like a number. So if as an example, let's work on my virtual environment here. Wrong one. Actually, Django, there we go. So I previously created this Python virtual environment and I installed my requirements into it. Really the only dependency is Django itself. But now I can actually run the server. So this is the basic Django running a local dev server. Oh, looks like I already have it running. I do. Haha, different tab. Okay, so I got the server running here at my local host on port 6100. So for example, I could curl it port 6100. And I have an endpoint called counter. Is it counter or counters? I can't even remember. Counters. And you can see it gives you a little JSON blob. Actually, why don't we just make this, pipe it through to Python's JSON module to pretty print it. There we go. So it just spits back a list of counter objects. There's two of them in my database. One has an ID of 1 and a count of 0. The other has an ID of 2 and a count of 5. Really simple REST-like interface. I can also, if I want to query for a particular counter, I can do so by its ID. So for example, that's getting the second counter here, which is a count of 5. Really toy example, right? This isn't using Django REST framework or anything like that, just plain basic Django. I can show you the code. It's very, very simple and straightforward. Nothing really magical here. So what about tests? So of course, because I'm a good software developer, I have unit tests for this project. And in Django, the normal way you run your unit tests is, again, through manage.py, and you go test and the name of the project. In this case, my project is called Django test. Silly name, but anyway, you can see I have 3 unit tests, all 3 passed. Yay, that's good. But you know what? This is boring. We got to use the new shiny, and Pytest is shiny. Pytest is cool. So I want to run the unit test with Pytest. So how do we do that? Because by default, this is the normal test runner that Django uses. This is not Pytest. So the first thing we need to do is get Pytest installed, and that's pretty easy to do. Pip install Pytest will give you the latest version. Actually, maybe well, I'll leave it with the requirements file, but there we go. Okay, so we've installed Pytest, so I should now have a, whoops, wrong window, a Pytest command, and I do. Oh, that's weird. I ran it, but it says there's 0 tests. Well, that's not right. I just saw before I had 3 tests. So what happened? Maybe I just need to give it a little hint and point it at the directory where the project lives. So let's try that. Still not finding them. Okay, let's point it right at the tests themselves. We got an error. Okay, so that's not right. But as it turns out, there is actually a Pytest plugin for working with a Django project, and unsurprisingly, it's called Pytest Django. So if we go pip install Pytest Django, we'll get to it as well. And now I bet you our test will run. Ta-da! Look at that. So just install Pytest Django, and ta-da! Your old existing tests that you had from before now work. Magic! In fact, did I have to? I think I could have just pointed at nope, I did actually have to point it right at the tests. And of course, if you had it also, in the case of this project, there's just a single source file with all my unit tests because it's such a small, tiny toy project. But if you had a module inside this Django test directory called test, and within there you had all your unit tests, you could just point it at that directory as well. That's totally fine, would totally work. In fact, I think I might even be able to make that work here. Oh no, there is an init.py. Okay, anyways. So, success. We can run our unit test with Pytest. So we're done. But, like, part of the reason we want to use Pytest is not just because it's a different runner, although this is cool. Like, I do really quite like the test runner with, or using Pytest as the test runner, because there's all sorts of different options and flags and things you can use on the command line to get warnings and various other, niceties. But at the end of the day, one of the nice things about Pytest is there's a different style of test you can write. So I thought it'd be kind of interesting too to take one of these existing tests that is sort of the old unit test style method on a class and convert it to a Pytest function test. So let's take this last one here and we'll just blink. So now it's no longer a method on a class, it's a standalone function, which means there's no self argument. Oh, we can already start to see where we're probably going to run into a problem here, because now there's no self argument. So how do I get that client thing that Django gives us? And whoa, hey, there's no assert equal anymore. Well, the assert equal thing is fine. That you're going to run into this if you start using Pytest anyway, that, instead of using self.assert equal or assert, the unit test style assert methods, you just replace them with assert statements. So we can do that. That's fine. Like, this is a pretty straightforward mechanical change. But this client thing, that's going to be a problem. And I bet you if I run the test now, they're just not going to work. And sure enough, client is not defined. So how do we get a client? Do we give up? And of course the answer is no, we don't give up. So again, that Pytest Django plugin is not only does it just make your test work with Pytest, but it also provides a few nice fixtures. And one of those fixtures is a fixture called client. So I haven't imported anything different. The only change I've made to my test here is I've taken that method, turned it to a function, and now there's this client argument, but I haven't defined that anywhere. So where does that come from? And will this even work? Well, let's see if it works. Ooh, that's not right. Oh, that's a different error. So that's okay. So let's solve one thing at a time. So this client thing actually is resolving fine. And maybe what I should have done is I should have done this in the opposite order. Talked about the database issue first and then talked about the client. But anyways, so this test, because it's working with code that interacts with Django models, we need a database for doing that. And in stock Django, if you just inherit from test case, which is a class defined in Django, then you get this nice setup of a database on your test setup, and it tears down the database when the test completes. Or sorry, it restores the database to its initial state out on the test teardown. So how do we get that with when we're no longer inheriting from Django test case? And of course, the answer is actually in the output that Pytest gave us here. It says database access not allowed. Use the Django DB mark or the DB or transactional DB fixtures to enable it. So there's a few things we could do. We could use a DB fixture, which Pytest Django again provides. And I think now if I run these tests, they'll work. Ta-da! Or, and it's, for whatever reason, it's a little bit more common to do this. You can use the Django DB mark. And I believe that comes from pytest.mark.django_db, I think. I am guessing. So you know what? Why don't we Google this? That was me troubleshooting something else. Pytest Django. Go to the docs. And what was that thing called again? Django_DB. Okay, let's do the first one here. Yeah, enabling database access and tests. So you can either apply it as a decorator to a single test, or you can also do this magic line of Pytest mark equals pytest.mark.django._db. And that line looks a little weird at first when the first time you see it. Oh, so I did have it right. I do also need to import Pytest now. And actually that's a third party, so we'll move him down here. And this line looks kind of weird because it looks like it's just an assignment to this identifier Pytest mark. So how is that going to have an effect on anything? But sure enough, if I run the test, it'll work. But this is actually a Pytest thing. It's a special variable inside Pytest, and what it allows you to do is mark all tests within a given test module, i.e. all the tests within this file, to be marked with this Django DB mark. And then what Pytest Django does is when you run your test, any test that's marked with that that mark, that Django_DB, it will spin up or it will give the database access to that test, just like you get with stock Django inheriting from test case. So that works. So that's one way of doing it. As I said, this using the Pytest mark means you're applying it to all tests within this module. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. Sometimes you actually want to be very precise and apply it to a specific test. And you can do that with the decorator. We'll just get rid of this line actually, instead of commenting out. That works too. Or, of course, again, the third option is to use the DB fixture that Pytest Django provides. And that also works. Pretty snazzy. And then there we go. Now we have a Pytest style unit test, and we still have all the niceties that we had from stock Django. I'm actually going to put the decorator back because for me personally, I actually prefer this decorator syntax, but kind of a personal preference thing. But yeah, hopefully this video was helpful, and we'll see you another time.